Thank you. Thank you so much for the kind introduction, and also for flagging that my current midlife crisis seems to be manifested in poetry. We'll get to that by the end of the talk. So I imagine you can see the slides.
Yes.
Yeah. So we've all been doing Zoom for I don't know how long, and we still always ask the question because it still always seems to go wrong at some point or another. So the title is, as you noted, is Search, Showrooming and Retail Variety. This is joint work with my smarter and younger co-author, Sandro, who sadly will not be on the call because it's 2 in the morning where he is now. Here in Toronto, it's still yesterday, so I wasn't sure what to put for the date. Okay, so probably this audience, and I should say, thank you for including me in this, and thank you also for the many buddies and familiar names that I see in the participant list. It's flattering that you're getting up early or staying up late for this. So I mean, I think we all know what showrooming is. It's kind of going and finding out about something in one place and then buying it somewhere else. Showrooming is a big deal. So you know, it's something in policy, and it's something in the literature as well. So I don't know if you can see that. When I went into Google Scholar, it says 3,500 articles when I search the term showrooming. So this is my excuse for not doing a related literature slide and telling you that I'm going to cover all of the related literature. So this is something that a lot of people have been worrying about for a long time in the academic and policy worlds. We're worrying about it too. We're really thinking about this kind of showrooming that, you know, we're going and trying on shirts and or shoes or stereos or whatever it is, and then possibly buying them elsewhere. So Sandra and I were talking about trainers. I'll run with audio equipment for my working example in a bit. So we've all been worried about it. What's it done? Well, it killed Circuit City, apparently, but and it was going to kill Best Buy, apparently. But if you look at the stock price of Best Buy relative to the S&P 500, this lower one's the S&P 500. This higher one is Best Buy. So it didn't kill Best Buy. Best Buy seems to be performing even better than the market. This is, you know, what counts for empirical evidence for people like me. You know, and in newspapers seem to be talking about it less as well. So this, I think I picked from Forbes. It's saying, you know, what's happened to showrooming feels like big retail's taking back the shopping trip. Reverse showrooming, this is from an investment site. These companies are cashing in on their physical stores, you know, and the firm that we expected to do all the showrooming that there was to do is now opening physical stores. So Amazon has like 7 different retail format brick and mortar stores that it seems to be experimenting with and opening up. So, you know, what showrooming has really done is maybe an open question, and maybe the paper that we have speaks to this a little bit. What the paper, I think, genuinely does speak to, and these are big questions that we're not going to answer in a theory paper, but you know, what the paper I think does speak to is that the retail environment has changed dramatically over my lifetime. The Hortaxis Syverson paper, this is, I think, a gel or a jet paper, one of the two, says, look, part of the big story in the last 15, 20 years has not just been internet that we all talk about, but has also been the growth of big box stores, the Walmarts, and you know, now my colleague at Rotman Hadi, El Hadi Sawi, who's fantastic, you should check him out, will tell you that part of the story is also dollar stores and things like that. But the retail environment has been changing. You know, supermarkets in the UK went from hypermarts and also super localized things. There's a range of different types of places to buy a range of different types of stuff. Our story is going to be that the kind of stores and formats that are out there are going to change how consumers learn, how consumers search. One particular way to search, and it's, you know, one that we've been interested in, is showrooming, figuring out what you like at one store and then buying it somewhere else. Okay, for us, it's going to be learning about the product rather than learning about yourself. So we're going to be a little bit distinct from Alessandro's presentation. Now, the other thing that Sandro and I have internalized from being in the literature for being old is search behaviors affect prices. And some kinds of search behaviors raise prices and other kinds of search behaviors lower prices. So the sort of search behaviors that raise prices are sort of a la diamond. We know that if consumers are looking only for one good and are searching for stores that sell those one good, then that kind of search doesn't discipline prices, because there's going to be some kind of hold up power that raises prices. And in the sort of model of diamond that does your head in the first time you see it, even though search might be pretty cheap to do, firms still end up charging the monopoly price. So searching for prices doesn't discipline prices. In fact, it leads to inelastic demand. Okay, and we'll come back to that with showrooming, because showrooming is going to be a form of search where, if all you're doing is going to one place and figuring out what you want in one place, buying somewhere else, then that somewhere else has some hold up power over you. Okay. Might be constrained by the price that you've originally bought from, but that's not really much of a constraint. On the other hand, there's another kind of search that we do know does indeed put some discipline on prices. This is when I'm searching from stores and searching for different match types, where I might react to unexpected prices. Okay, this is sort of Walensky type search. So we're going to have a model that incorporates both of these elements. And the variety of retail formats is going to affect how many consumers are engaged in different kinds of search, and therefore it's going to feed back through into prices. Now, of course, that's an equilibrium model, so all of that has to be sort of self-consistent. We'll show that we can do that, and then once we can do that, we can start exploring things like marginal changes in the extent of showrooming. Okay, and we'll be explicit about that. So a lot of the literature on showrooming, and as I said, I'm not going to talk through it all, partly because I'm going to embarrass myself with seminal contributions being made by some people who I saw here earlier. I saw Julian's name on the list and Chengxi's name on the list, and there's a bunch of great papers on showrooming. In a lot of those papers, just like in Alessandro's paper, showrooming is going to constrain behavior, but it doesn't actually ever happen. Okay, from introspection, and this is the kind of applied theory that I do, is introspection-based theory. Showrooming does sometimes happen. It sometimes happens, but it doesn't always happen. In our model, it's going to happen, and and for it to happen, we need kind of heterogeneity in two dimensions. We need something different to be happening at the different stores, or there's no reason to go from one store to another. And we need consumers to be different. Otherwise, they'd either all showroom or none of them would showroom. So there's going to be quite a lot of heterogeneity in the model. There's going to be quite a lot of parameters going on. It's going to be a little bit messy, and we're going to try and kind of cut through that and give some intuitions, I hope, but in a way that's going to allow us to think about marginal changes in showrooming and marginal effects of those changes. The key idea here is that we're going to have our showrooms are going to be what we're going to call deep stores, building on the marketing literature. And a deep store is going to offer lots of varieties of the similar goods. So I'm going to think about trying to figure out what stereo to buy. I might go to a higher end audio store or to a store that has lots and lots of different stereos, figure out which one I want to buy, and then buy it somewhere else where it's cheaper. For a minute, I'm not going to be thinking about online. We'll bring online in later in the model. So I could buy it at a big place, or I could buy it at let's say, a supermarket that offers only a few different varieties of stereo, but offers them pretty cheaply. That I would call a shallow store. Okay. So people could look in deep stores, they could look in shallow stores, they could start at deep stores and move to shallow stores. only one kind of search in our model is going to discipline prices, and that's people going from shallow store to shallow store, thinking to learn match. Okay, so these are, if you know the search literature, this is going to be Valinsky style searches are going to be the ones who discipline prices. If I always buy from the deep store, then they have hold up power for me. If I know what I want and then I'm going to the shallow store just because of price, well, all of those shallow stores will have some hold up power over me. So what's kind of putting some downward pressure on prices is these people who search through these shallow stores. Who are these people who search through shallow stores? Well, they've got to be somewhat picky or they wouldn't be responding to match at all. Okay, but they can't be too picky or they'd be wanting to go to the deep stores to really figure out what they want. So they're going to be somewhat picky people, and they're going to be people who find it sort of somewhat expensive to showroom. Otherwise, they might be very tempted to showroom. Then the question is, what's going to determine what that group of people look like? And that's going to characterize for us what's putting pressure on prices. And the kind of observation here is that more showrooming can lead to higher prices. And so the fact that showrooming is happening doesn't mean that Best Buy dies. Okay, so that's the rather long introduction for a short session, but that kind of tells you where we're trying to go. So these model elements, we're going to have search through different kinds of stores, and in particular, there's going to be some kinds of stores, like Park Avenue Audio, Sound by Singer, back in the day, Best Buy and Circuit City, that maybe offered both type of goods. So we're going to have search with multi-product stores. If you know the literature on search with multi-product stores, you're probably thinking of the awesome work by Jidong Zhu or Andrew Rhodes and that literature. They have multi-product stores where the different products are independent in the consumer's utilities. So I might go to the store and buy everything in the store. We're not thinking about that world at all. We're thinking about a world where you go to the store to decide, where Vasiliki has to buy a bike, she's only going to buy one bike. There might be 20 different bikes there, but she's only going to buy one of them. Okay, so these are substitute goods. Okay, these are substitute goods, and I could go to a store to figure out which of these multiple bikes or audio equipment or whatever I like, or I might go to only one of them. Okay, so if we're thinking, and our assumption is that we have this kind of directed search in terms of type of store. So I know it's a broad store before I go to that broad store, or if it's the good that sells, if it's the store that sells good one, I know it's a type 1 shallow store, or I know that it's a type 2 shallow store. So I can, if you want, Google ahead to see if they carry what I have, but then I have to actually go there to figure out the price and the type of the good. Okay, stores are going to choose prices, and a consumer, when they buy from Good Eye at some price, well, this is going to be some match realization for that consumer with that particular type of good. Okay, and these match values are going to be blown up or shrunk according to your pickiness. So that's what mu is doing here. Okay, and to stop diamond paradox effects, we're going to have downward sloping demand at the individual level, which is why I'm writing a UPI there rather than a more familiar V minus PI. Very good. So this is something maybe that so this looks kind of familiar from Anderson, Renault, Valinsky things. We have this twist that we're having a U here instead of like a minus P. The reason for that is it just kind of makes our life easier with a diamond paradox. And we're having this pickiness blow things up or close things down. So as I mentioned, the consumer can distinguish the type of store, that is whether it's a deep store, shallow store that sells good 1, or shallow store that sells good 2. We're going to force the consumer to learn the match value before purchasing. You can't buy without purchasing. A tiny probability that this thing is going to be, that you're allergic to it, it's going to kill you or whatever it is going to deliver something like that. And the benefit of going to, and to learn this match, and I have to pay some inspection cost. The benefit of going to a deep store is I can economize on inspection costs. Rather than paying twice the inspection cost, I pay 1 plus gamma the inspection cost. So there's some discount associated with viewing them both at the same time. Okay. Note that we're forcing the consumers to search both products at a deep store, but I mean, it's going to turn out in equilibrium. They would never go to the deep store if they didn't think there was a pretty good chance they were going to search both products. And we're going to end up supposing that these two parameters, the inspection cost and the search efficiency, are common to all consumers. If I go to visit another store after I've already learned my match value, okay, that's going to entail a visit cost, which is different from an inspection cost. And you can think about, the way I like to think about this is how guilty I'm going to feel about having spent 20 minutes talking to the sales assistant, decided that I like the good, but going somewhere else just to buy it. So people vary in their extent of guilt. I can tell you that among the co-authors on this paper, there's variance in the extent of guilt. I'll leave you to speculate at how that plays out, those of you who know Sandro and I. Very good. Okay. We're going to focus on symmetric equilibria. So we're going to exclude prominence effects here. And so that means that we're going to think of these shallow stores of type 1 setting the same price as shallow stores of type 2, and deep stores charging the same price for both goods. Okay. With that, we can write the equilibrium prices, whether of type 1 goods or of type 2 goods at the shallow stores, as PS and PD. And it's going to be easy to show, but for now, if you like, we can assume that the price at the deep store is greater than or equal to the price at the shallow store. Okay, the deep store is offering you something that the shallow store can't, which is a search efficiency on learning both goods. You're paying for that for that opportunity. And if you think about the high-end audio equipment stores that carry everything, they charge more than buying the stereo at my supermarket. That's the idea I have in mind. All right. Because I have this ugly UP, then I need something that's not just a price difference, it's a utility adjusted price difference, but in my mind and in your mind, you should be thinking of it as basically the price difference. Okay. Very good. So the first thing we're going to have to do is think about consumer behavior. So we're going to have stores set prices, then consumers act. So we have to think about how consumers act given some expectations of store prices. And they have to decide what kind of store to visit first, which naturally is going to depend on how picky they are. And also what they're going to do next. If they go to a shallow store, do they want to move on to a second shallow store? Or do they want to stop there? If they go to a deep store, do they want to go to another deep store? Do they want to go to a shallow store? Do they want to buy, or and so on and so forth? So this is the kind of heart of the paper, which is characterizing the consumer behavior in and how it varies with some key parameters for us. And the key parameters for us is going to be how picky the consumers are and how much guilt they suffer on showrooming. Okay. So people with low B don't have a lot of guilt. If you have no guilt at all, if you have almost no guilt, then you're going to go and visit the deep store. And then after you visited the deep store, you're going to go buy it cheaper at a shallow store. So these guys are going to be showroomers. Okay, if you really don't care at all about the realization of the good, then even that's not worth it for you. You don't pay the initial, you don't want to pay 1 plus gamma S, you'll just play the single S and buy it at a shallow store. So we might have these guys who go to a shallow store and buy no matter what they see because they're so insensitive to match. Okay, so that's what's going on with these guys.
Here?
Sure.
When I hear you say these stories, I'm thinking about people that have high opportunity cost of time.
Yep.
So they might go and they just don't want to bother anymore. So
you can think of B that way. That's fine. Yep. I mean, that's another interpretation to this B. Yep. I like, I'm a good Jewish boy. Guilt is sort of deep within me, but there's surely different interpretations for B. Very good. We can have people who are very picky, so they know that they're going to want to see everything before they buy. They suffer a lot of guilt, or they have an extremely high opportunity cost of time. They're going to go to a deep store, and they're going to buy from that deep store. Okay. And the last category I have that are the most interesting ones, as I've sort of suggested for you, are these dark blue ones. So these guys are picky enough that seeing something might change what they do, but they're not very picky. So they're kind of expecting there's a pretty good chance that when they that the first thing they see will be good enough. But there's still some chance that what they see might be so disappointing that they might want to move on. Okay, and those are going to be what we call the searchers. They're going to start at some shallow store expecting there's a pretty decent chance that they like what they see and they end up buying there. But if they're sufficiently disappointed, they're going to move on to the second type of store. If they thought it was really likely that they were going to be disappointed, then they would, they would end up starting out at the deep store. But they don't, which is why they start at the shallow store, and sometimes they're going to end up moving on. So the point here is these people who only go to one kind of store and never move on and never expect to move on, they're not imposing any pressure on prices. Similarly, the showroomers, they're going to impose pressure on the deep stores. Right? I mean, that's going to be the trade-off for the deep stores is, am I capturing people is moving along this threshold? But it's only these searchers who are going to impose pressure on the price at the shallow stores, which is then going to kind of be reflected in the wedge of what the deep stores want to charge to manage this trade-off. Okay, so we need some of these people around to keep the prices away from monopoly prices. Okay, that's the idea. Okay, so this is what consumer behavior is going to be, but to write this down, I have to assume something about prices. Now, of course, I have to bring pricing back into it and make sure and think about prices. So we took prices as given before. Like I said, the diamond logic says only the searchers discipline prices, but of course prices are endogenous. So are there ever any searchers in equilibrium? Does such an equilibrium exist? Is it unique? What are the properties of such an equilibrium? Well, this would be a boring paper if they didn't exist. What about existence and uniqueness? Well, there's always going to be the kinds of equilibria where everyone charges the monopoly price and no one searches, like, everyone charges the same monopoly price. So everybody shows up at the deep stores and buys there. But there can be other equilibria as well that involve showrooming. And since this is a behavior that we observe in practice, this strikes us as an equilibrium that's worth exploring. So we're going to kind of focus our attention on this one, noticing that there are these other equilibria as well. Okay. The model has lots of moving parts to kind of focus us a little bit and to make this a little bit more tractable for us to play with. We're going to restrict to only 2 levels of pickiness. So we're going to have picky and less picky people. We're going to assume that most of the parameters are common across people. So that inspection cost S, that search efficiency gamma, and we're going to allow the visit costs to vary according to some distribution, and the match values, this epsilon ij, to be distributed according to some distribution as well. Okay, so we need those things to vary to get something industry. Okay, so for showrooming, we better have a picture where the mu h, where the less picky people are searchers. Okay, and that we have some people living in the showrooming region, so that we're going to have the more picky people dealing with this trade-off. If this wasn't the case, then the deep stores wouldn't sell anything. But for our equilibrium, we need something interesting to happen that looks like this. So we can say we need the picture to look like this, what do we need in terms of parameters to deliver us a picture that looks like this? That's how we're going to show existence of this kind of equilibrium. Dum, dum, dum. Okay, I think I said this before. For the deep stores, pricing is going to be determined by the margin of showrooming against brand loyals. But for the shallow stores, pricing is going to be more interesting. It's going to be determined by the mix of searchers who are sensitive to small deviations in price, who are trading off, slightly worse matches against slightly lower prices, and against showroomers who are not sensitive at all to these kinds of small deviations. So we've gone a long way, half an hour into this presentation. I finally give you a result. The result is there are parameters. If you want details, read the paper. Where there is an equilibrium, where this showrooming type behavior exists. So all of the picky consumers start at a deep store. Some of them showroom, the ones who are less guilty about showrooming. And some of the less picky start deep in showroom, and the rest act as searchers. I don't know that it's helpful to show you these pricing equations, but we can, and we can tell you, sorry, this should be an S. There's a typo there, but none of this notation means much to you. This is just to say for any price at shallow stores, there's some wedge that we can determine that's going to pin down the price at the deep store that kind of trades off a higher price from those people who are feeling guilty. This F is the distribution of the guilt against my the usual margin volume trade-off for a monopolist. So for the broad stores, prices are going to be defined by that appropriate wedge on top of any price at the shallow store. So we need the price at the shallow store to be below the monopoly price. And for the price at the shallow store, well, we have to take account different kinds of people who might be shopping. One kind of person who might be shopping looks a lot like an Anderson Renault or Volinsky type searcher. These are kind of in dark blue, and I can scribble down notation for that. And there's also the showroomers who are not responding at all to local deviations in prices. And so that's going, that inelasticity of those consumers is going to lead to the price to be higher than would otherwise be the case. Okay, so what did I write on the slide? I guess the key is there's a lot of notation here I haven't introduced. The paper presents even more. Hopefully I've been clear enough about what the forces are. Okay, so some sort of sense check, and I know I have 10, 15 minutes or so, some sense check, things that we would expect to happen. Monopoly prices are higher than both these prices. An increase in, this should be inspection costs, I should say. Inspection costs increases all the prices. If we have fewer picky consumers, that's going to reduce prices. If we increase how picky the less picky are, that's going to raise prices. And the way I've got this set up, changing how picky the picky consumers are has no effect, because that margin for the deep stores is only based around the guilt around showrooming. It has nothing to do with how picky they are. One thing that's maybe not so obvious is making search less efficient at broad stores, at these deep stores, actually reduces prices. Why is that? Because it becomes less interesting for the less picky to go to the deep stores. And so more of them are searching around, and that can lead to lower prices, interestingly. So now we can think about the effect of showrooming. And the kind of received wisdom here, and it's true in our model as well, is that showrooming puts pressure on prices and damages deep stores. Well, it's true that if all consumers only showed up at deep stores and there weren't these shallow stores, these deep stores would charge monopoly prices. But we have to think, if we're thinking about like small changes in showrooming, say we have ad campaigns that make people guiltier, or people like Vasiliki get busier, so we kind of change things on the margin, we have to think also about what happens at the narrow stores. And more showrooming, it might put some discipline on deep stores, but it puts less discipline on the narrow stores. Okay, so we have to think also about what happens at the prices that these narrow stores that consumers would end up buying from. Easier showrooming means more inelastic demand at these stores, and so higher prices there that filter through to higher prices at the deep stores as well. Okay, that's the second point. That these higher prices at these shallow stores then filter through to higher prices at the deep stores also. How can you show this analytically? Well, we could start at parameterizations where we have a showrooming equilibrium and think about some marginal changes. We can think about introducing some fraction of less picky consumers who never showroom, or we can think about introducing some small fraction of the more picky consumers who never showroom, and assume that everybody else is kind of as before. So that's one way to think about the impact of showrooming. It's actually not in the paper that I've circulated, but we've had, we're in a revision process that's pushing us on this. So I'm trying this out on you guys. You're the first to see it. Actually, Anovia was the first to see it on Monday. So thanks for looking at that. So suppose that we just make more showroomers among the more picky, okay? So if we're in the world where we haven't changed it all the less picky guys, but we have the more picky guys, well, that means that some picky consumers who would otherwise showroom are instead going to buy from deep stores. If we take some of these picky consumers and tell them don't showroom anymore, then that's just changing some showroomers into no showroomers. And then we get the received wisdom, we get higher prices. There's among the people who show up at the shallow stores, a higher fraction of them are sensitive to prices now, because a bunch of the insensitive ones we've shifted out. Okay, what happens if we make some of the people who were less picky, we now tell them you can't showroom anymore? Then those guys are going to start searching through shallow stores, and they're going to discipline prices. So if we're getting rid of showroomers, if we're getting rid of showrooming, to determine whether that's going to raise prices or lower prices depends crucially on who it is that we're stopping from showrooming. Is it the more picky guys who were leading to higher prices, or the less picky guys who, if they start searching, if they start showing up at these shallow stores, are actually going to put some discipline on prices and lead to lower prices? So that's the heart of it. That's the key idea. Okay, in the paper we did some other things around retailer variety that I don't know whether I should torture you with or not. It's kind of hard to gain a sense of the audience when I see 3 people who are relatively interested people, but thanks for being there. It makes a huge difference. You know, we can think about what happens if we shut down shallow stores. If we shut down shallow stores, then necessarily we're going to jump to monopoly prices. So either the price is going to be unchanged if we were in such a monopoly equilibrium, or necessarily the price is going to be higher. Welfare can't be any higher if we do this. Anyone who wanted to go to a deep store was going to a deep store anyway. If we shut down deep stores, it might be that prices stay the same and that welfare falls. Okay, why is that? Well, because we're losing out on the search efficiency. So there's that search efficiency component associated with the deep stores. It can be that prices can fall and welfare can fall. Okay, because now prices might fall because we move people into this kind of searching behavior, but maybe the search efficiency was so valuable that even those lower prices aren't compensating for that. Or we can be in a situation where prices can go up and welfare falls as well. All right, not very interesting, but I kind of talked about retail variety, so I guess I needed to show you that. The last extension that we look at is to think about a kind of online competitor, where we're thinking about this different sector, this different retail venue, which I guess we're thinking of as online, as being a place where you can only learn prices, but you can't learn anything about fit. And to make the pricing decision very easy, we're going to assume that that sector is perfectly competitive. And in that section, you have access to prices at marginal cost. Okay, so we're gonna think of that as the internet, and we're going to give some consumers access to this sector and others not. So we're going to think of this as savviness. You know, my mother still doesn't like to shop online. So, you know, the question is my mother a theta, a picky type or a non-picky type? You could probably hazard a guess as to that. So some of the picky consumers have access to the sector and are savvy. Some of the less picky can be savvy. Some of the more picky can be savvy. The rest we're going to call naive. Trivially here, all the savvy are going to buy at the price only sector. They're going to learn their match, presumably at a deep store, and they're going to go and buy it elsewhere. Or if you like, that some of this savviness, some of this lack of savviness or naivety might be guilt about, might be guilt in the same way that I was talking about guilt before. These are people with infinite Bs, if you like. So the question is this price only sector going to pick off showroomers or searchers? And depending on whether it picks off showroomers or searchers, it might either lower the price or raise the price. Okay, so for the same reason as before, what's key is out of the fraction of people who show up at these shallow stores, how many of those are searchers who are going to be responsive to prices? And changing the mix of people out there can either increase that ratio or decrease that ratio. So in particular, starting from a showrooming equilibrium, the introduction of a price-only sector can lead to higher prices at both deep and niche stores if we're picking off relatively more of the picky types and we're leaving more of the less picky types. And we're going to get the opposite in the opposite case. So I made a bit of a meal of that, but it doesn't really matter. Hopefully what I've shown you is the following, that patterns of search and equilibrium prices are co-determined and depend on retail variety. We're going to have a range of different search behaviors in the world and in our model. And in our model, at least, where price pressure comes from is shallow searchers. Okay, whatever changes the number of these and the patterns of their search behavior and the mix of who goes to shallow stores between showroomers and searchers is going to have a knock-on effect on prices throughout the whole sector. In particular, more showroomers can lead to higher or lower prices depending on whether they're drawn from the more picky or the less picky. And similarly, we have this thing for the price-only sector. All right, so I have one last thing for Hodaka. So here's the relevant haiku. So what brings lower prices? Somewhat picky consumers figuring out match. And I will leave it there.
Great, Heski, thanks very much, including excellent haiku. Right, so our discussant is Anovia Dai, who is assistant professor at Hong Kong Baptist University, working on some very interesting and important work on consumer search, networking, among other things. So very appropriate discussion for us. All right, so Anovia, please go ahead.
Can you see my slides now?
Yes.
Cool. Okay. So I will thank Heski for giving very inspiring and I think very clean talk in my morning. So I think in this paper, they show us like what kind of key ingredients that we need, like retail variety and also overlapping selection across different retailers, and also the different the heterogeneous level of consumers' pickiness, so that we can observe showrooming in our equilibrium behavior. And also he shows how those different ingredients like interact with each other, and to see how consumer search behavior and the price interact with each other. And also in the paper, he delivers some an intuitive like comparative statistics result. And what I would like to know more about, like from this framework, is the first thing is about the variety of the products. So in this paper for illustration, I think Heski only introduced 2 products. But we can think about that when the variety of the products increase, there could be an economies of scale to save search costs within one deep store, so that it could possibly make showrooming more popular. Like when we have 2 store, only have 2 products, I may still go to one shallow store after another. But when we have like 10 products to try, I may just go to one deep store and try all of them together, right? So I wonder, is there any like comparative statistics regarding this parameter? And another thing is about is it possible to endogenize the retail variety? So here, our each store has a given selection of products, like we are deep store or we are shallow store, like as we are. So what if they could choose the selections that they would like to provide, even at some cost? And given analysis, it seems that the deep store here does not have any incentive to become a shallow store. But how about the shallow store? Like I imagine it's possible for Walmart and Target try to include more products so that they could become a deep store. And in addition, like it's related to my previous point, that if there are more than 2 variety of the products, there also could be some stores, if you allow them to endogenize the retailer variety, they could just choose to include several products, but not all of them, and also not be just a shallow store. And another point I want to make is about the price of availability. So I think internet has made price information more accessible to consumers. And even I can imagine people that like to go to shop in real shops, they could check price information online before they go there. And I think also in the literature review part, you mentioned several papers that not studying the exact model, but they have observable price. And you only mentioned that they have different effect and different analysis. And I wonder how that will change the showrooming in your equilibrium. And the last point I want to make is about the online channel. So here, online channel only serves as a price sector, and the consumers also cannot purchase directly from the online channel. I think in reality, it could also offer some free shipping and returns, and also hundreds of consumer reviews help us to guide our search for better match. And so at least it could provide some partial information regarding our match quality. And I can also imagine there could be another kind of showroomers that search online first, knowing all the partial information, and just go to a deep store to try to get the last piece of fitting information and finalize their purchase there. And I also wonder, how will that kind of online channel change the game? And the last point I want to make is that online channel might not be a competitor as you introduce it here, but rather the online store of an existing deep or shallow store. Like we all know, like for Best Buy, Target, and Walmart, they have the online channel. And I just wonder, like, how would that change the game as well? So that's my very short discussion, like something I would like to know from this framework.